All right, welcome back. We're going to switch our conversations and talking about the economy. I have here with me Mr. Ajibola Olayinka. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Yes, there's a lot that's going on with, especially since the new minimum wage was announced, and I think I wanted to start with that conversation. You know, we always claim to be a federation, and most people say we're just very cosmetic with the talk about being a federation, because if you look at true federations like the United States and Germany, you know, a lot of states make these decisions independently. What you are paid in California is not necessarily going to be paid in Indianapolis, because the governors of those states decide how they run their states. Bringing it back home now, Lagos, of course, for example, earns the most money from IGR. Is it fair to say that a Lagos, for example, should pay the exact same thing that a Yobe state should pay or an Ebonyi state? You know, is that a fair way to, and how does that affect the economy as a whole?
Thank you very much. The issue of minimum wage related to internally generated revenue is just to ensure that the revenue we create in a particular state is proportional to the needs of the people, provided we cut our coat according to our clothes. We don't go into excesses. Let's take a few years back. Up to the mid-60s, we run regionalism, and we had cocoa in the west, we had palm oil in the east, we had the pyramid of groundnut in the north, and the issue of IGR was never any issue. And we were able to sustain the needs of each region, and each region was able to move and march forward. So eventually oil came, and the equation changed. Up to that point, oil was not contributing up to 8% of the national economy. But then oil came, and then we had multiple creation of states, and the challenges of managing the state came up. Eventually today, most of the states are depending on what is distributed from the federation account. As best as Lagos is performing, is only managing to deliver up to 50% for the budget year in, year out. By the end of 2018, Lagos has succeeded in exceeding 1 trillion in terms of internally generated revenue. So for Yobe, for Ekiti, and all those states who are claiming there are challenges about raising money, Osun, and the rest of them, we need to ask ourselves, what are the comparative advantage we have in those states? So it's very important for us to understand that Nigeria is so blessed that in very many areas you can look at, you will see something that single out a particular state. We know that over 60% of our population are making their income from agriculture. That is an area we can further granulate, we can break it down further, and be able to see from state to state there are a lot of opportunities. But we actually need to do a lot of hard work to be able to take advantage of that, so that people will not begin to ask questions. How do we sustain the minimum wage?
Yeah, which is why a lot of people seem to say that as well. You know, it's a lot of hard work, and it's mostly very long term. You know, a lot of these states, because for over the years and with the military, a lot of states became so dependent on the federal government that most states have even lost, you know, you've talked about cocoa, you talked about groundnut pyramids, these things don't exist anymore. So to get back to that sort of basic, it's going to take a number of years. Is this something we're willing to wait for? And in that short to medium term, what do we do, if at all?
Thank you. We are really not going back in that direction. Those were the age of raw materials. Now globalization has taught us we need value added. If we add value to what we used to produce in the mid-60s, we are going to make a difference to Nigeria's economy.
Even more money.
Exactly. And that is what is going to happen. And no state really should be crying about the issue of we don't have enough money, because, come to think of it, the minimum wage actually is talking about the floor, below which we will not go, because it's talking about the quality of life.
Yeah.
Minimum wage of 30,000 naira. I mean, come on, 8,000 naira per day. Are we saying that is what will sustain a man on the street? Given the requirements for the need for food, the need for clothing, the need for housing, and the rest of that. And we are complaining about, it should be a guide that we should not go below that. Yeah. And we should look around to find the resources. When we talk about IGR, for example, we are just scratching the surface on IGR. Let's do the arithmetic. United Nations just announced, I think a week ago, that Nigeria is now 201 million in terms of population.
Scary.
Of that scary number, at least 20 million will come from Lagos. So if we do the maths, let's say 30% of that will come under the tax bracket for IGR purpose. And let's also assume that 50% will belong to the informal sector. We have not managed to bring them under the collection methodology. You talk about 4.5 million population. If we manage to pay 2,000 naira per head, then we end up with 9 trillion naira in a year. That's humongous. Now, I'm talking about Lagos, and Lagos is moving based on its needs. We have other states, they don't have as much need as Lagos. Yeah. And they can also look at their population and see what they can do. As a matter of fact, they can even say, look, of these 2,000 naira you are supposed to pay, we'll give you opportunity to pay instrumentally, pay 1,000 naira each.
Do you think states are still viable? There's a lot of talk about, return to regions, or at least the new geopolitical zones we have. Do you think the states are still viable?
Yeah, many times I hear talk like this, it appears we want to take a walk backward, yeah, and we ought to be moving forward. Our forefathers felt, with all the wisdom they had at that point in time, okay, let's create more states. Let's bring the government closer to the people. And because we believe these states are sustainable. Now, the issue is about sustainability of the state. After creating the state, we have never done the hard work. What is the database of a state? We don't even know.
Whose job is that? The governors or the federal government?
The governor is the chief executive of a state. Running a state is a serious business. Because today, when we talk about internally generated revenue, we are hammering and overkilling the formal sector. What's the percentage in the formal sector? The civil servants, the corporate bodies, and a few other ones. And we have above 60% in the informal sector, and nobody is thinking about them. And this is a huge source of revenue. Like I said, just 2,000 naira per head. If you do the math very well, last year, of course, Lagos State will be beating the drum for exceeding 1 trillion naira. But we could have collected 9 trillion naira. There is a lot of opportunities there we've not exploited.
Yeah. So how do we get governors now to be more forward-thinking? Is it legislation? Are you going to lead? Do we need like certain states to lead by example for, I don't know, or a peer review system? How do we get this ball rolling? Yeah,
a WhatsApp message went viral a couple of weeks back that you cannot legislate the poor to become rich.
Yes.
And you cannot legislate the rich to become poor. Legislation will not work. Just last week, the vice president told the incoming governors that, look, you need to do a lot of work to prevent the noise making about lack of money to pay salaries for your workers. And that is not an argument. It's not a suggestion. If we have a serious chief executive of a state who cannot think through the sustainability of the state, then there's a big problem coming. Because the rest of the world will not wait for Nigeria. We've cried enough. And it's important that we begin to take the steps that will make a difference to the people we govern.
You think every single state in this country can be self-sustaining?
I absolutely believe so. I mean, the 5 highest IGR states include Lagos, we have Rivers, Ogun State has come up very strongly, we have Delta, we have Kano, and the rest are languishing down there. They are languishing because we have not done the real work. If we do the real work, there is a high possibility we can lift and join this team who have succeeded in showing that IGR is the way to go.
Yeah. Is it all taxes we're talking about?
Yeah, we're talking, it's not just about taxes. When we talk about internally generated revenue, we know that, going by the statistics, the taxes are there, but we have other services the state is also providing that they can take advantage of. Yeah. The property are there, the roads are there, there are a lot of fines and penalties. There are a lot of money coming into state coffers.
Just need to...
But of course, we know the issue of accountability and transparency is key. Because even most of the so-called government workers, they make sure that a large portion of this money they go into private pockets. Yeah. We need to find a way to ensure that this money must move seamlessly, not from the payers to individuals, but to government. And that can be worked out with the inclusive model being run by the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Well, thank you very much. I hope those who should be listening are listening. We're about to start a second term of 4 years, or a new government of 4 years, basically, across the country. So I'm looking forward to greater, better years ahead for Nigeria. It's going to be a very tough ride, but we can weather the storm, I'm sure.
I believe so. I believe so.
Thank you very much, sir, for being here today. Well, like I always say, you can follow the conversation on Twitter. WhyNigerTV is the handle. The hashtag to follow, you have in mind, please visit our website, whyniger.tv. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you next time.